Welcome to the next episode of the Virtual Power Teams podcast. And today we have an exciting guest, Bani Sodhi. We've met a couple of years ago, but never live. It was always online. In fact, Bani approached me to deliver a keynote speak for her global leadership program, developing global leaders. And since then, we had a couple of engagements, always with a great pleasure. And I was her energy and passion for what she does is so contagious, is so engaging. So today you will have a chance to enjoy Bani and her noble mission. In fact, her motto is navigating the ambiguous world of careers for you. So strong words, strong motto. Welcome, Bani. Welcome to the Virtual Power Teams podcast. Please tell us who you are and what you do.
Thank you so much, Peter. Hello, everyone. It's lovely to be here today. I'm Bani Sodhi. As you heard Peter say, I am a global world of work professional. Geographically, I'm based in Switzerland, but virtually, I'm literally everywhere across the globe. Currently, I lead a global leadership development program for the Adecco Group. And I do so many things that it's really hard for me to answer this question for you, Peter. But I'd love to share with our listeners a little backstory about why I ended up doing what I do currently professionally. So I was born and brought up across the Indian subcontinent, and my father served in the military. Now, some people who are familiar with the military lifestyle know that you move to a new place every 1 to 2 years. Now, in India, every 200 kilometers, the language changes, the culture changes. So I grew up in a very, very multicultural environment. And in every instance, I experienced a lot of diversity of cultures, of thoughts, of mindsets, which made me a very curious child. Curious about the way we function as humans in this world, our ways of responding to stimuli in our environment, in our relationships, the way we look at the world. And so on. And I went on to study then political science and communication. And so all this while, my curiosity kept growing, and I realized that it's the people's business which intrigued me, and I discovered that I drew the most meaning out of supporting young professionals to sustainably accelerate their careers, which is why my motto of navigating the ambiguous world of careers, came through. So I've been in the human resources ever since, with a special focus on learning and development, creating learning cultures, leadership development, and that's what I do currently for a global Fortune 500 company.
Fantastic. And it is demanding, global teams, time zones, and so on. You partly answer, but why you do what you do? What is your strong why that, kept you staying? And, without a strong why, we kind of lose. And when the obstacle comes, we may kind of give up and so on. But a strong why is the wind in our sails. So what is your why?
And definitely, I think the why is relating back to my purpose. I started off as a HR project specialist where I was looking at, human resource projects for country implementation. And India is a big country. And that's where I started my career. And so, I realized that at that point, everybody needs to connect back to their why. And then, that is a point where in my life, I was like, okay, what is my why? And then I realized that my why was really relating to the fact that I wanted to tie people back to their own purpose, because I felt that there was sort of a vacuum in I experienced the vacuum myself because, I was thrown into the corporate world, and I did not know what I wanted at that time. I did not know what my purpose was. And, somebody came and told me, this is the purpose. And now it's your job to connect it to your job. So, and then I realized, okay, can I make my job the job to connect people's purpose to, the organization goals? And that is why, I really wanted to develop and bring about a sense of clarity, a sense of purpose, and a sense of mission about people and their jobs and their daily operations within a company. And that's why, I am where I am and I do what I do.
Absolutely. Connecting people to their purpose. Powerful why. Now, you've led global teams for quite some time, as you mentioned. What, from your perspectives, are the secrets of leading large-scale global teams?
Indeed. So I've been running, Peter, and you and I have been in workshops together where we've been dealing with a lot of large-scale teams, pre-COVID and post-COVID. And I'd like to share, some of my experiential discoveries along the journey. I like to call it the risk, but risk with a C. And I'll tell you what what this acronym means. So the R stands for relationships, the I stands for intention, the S stands for social awareness, and the C in the risk stands for communication. And that is something I think we also have touched upon different aspects of these in our engagements, Peter, when you have been with us. But just to throw a little light on this, I'd love to start with the topic of relationships. The real recipe of running large teams lies primarily on the way we look at our relationships in our teams. And Peter, I know you also talk a lot about interdependencies, and I feel with the pandemic, there is a lot of virtual working fatigue in our environment. It has, changed the way we interact with people so naturally that we probably haven't even realized it. And now looking at it from a large scale team perspective, the way we work has not only changed, it's not only changed the way we work, but our goals remain the same. Even though our working styles have changed, our teams have changed, our working hours might have changed, but the goal remains the same. And a lot of large teams obviously operate with a lot of interdependencies, and that is a given. So it's often very easy to lose sight of these interdependencies when you share so many relationships with people across the world. And it's also very easy to get equally frustrated because of these interdependencies. So I feel we need to keep these interdependencies really in mind to first look at developing our relationships and to also create this momentum in achieving collective goals. And I've seen working it out best in teams thus far that, starting off with just acknowledging these interdependencies and having that important dialogue with colleagues, it not only helps you build those relationships, but it also helps you sort of set the context, which ultimately sets you up for collective success. And I remember reading this very interesting line in the Harvard Business Review Press on emotionally intelligent confidence. And it said, when you realize your value to others, confidence is no longer about self-promotion. In fact, confidence is no longer about confidence, it's about purpose. So I think it's really important that we start off with really talking about those interdependencies that are present in our teams, especially in large teams, not just to be aware, but also to open up dialogue and just set the whole context.
Fantastic. So so many insights. Now, you mentioned you do many things and you're dealing with young talents and we are in challenging times. Is there anything in particular, apart from developing leaders, which you do more, enabling communities? We have quite a few of challenges now in terms of sustaining our planet. In fact, in my new book, Power Teams Beyond Borders, I focus from, the first was developing virtual power teams within the corporate environment. Now the second is beyond that, beyond the organizational boundaries, which would mean connecting with other organizations, building power teams with your partners, suppliers, and so on. But also next level is global communities. So is there anything, any insight, any project around going beyond the corporate world and making the world a better place?
Indeed. And before I come to this question, would you like me to talk a little more about the intention and the social awareness and the communication piece?
Absolutely. Sorry.
No worries. And it's interesting that you brought this out because the next part of the risk, that I've observed is about intention. And this also very well links to your new question about, the challenges that we are facing. I'd really like to spend some time talking about intention, and that is because you could have the best team in the world, you could have the best support in the world, and you could have the best of everything, but the results are probably going to be scattered if you don't set the right intentions for the team at the start. And since we're talking about large-scale teams, obviously the goals are also large-scale. So I feel it's really important to help the teams sort of start off with visualizing and also understanding what the intention is and how it is going to lead to, the collective achievement of goals that we set out to do. And an awesome starting point for that is to create awareness about the red thread that runs through everyone's work. And to top it, I think it's really also, identifying this red thread also helps ignite and engage the intrinsic motivation that each person brings onto the team. And then once you have motivated people, and it's not extrinsic motivation, it's intrinsic motivation, I think you also have to put in a lot less effort in really reiterating the intentions that you set out for. Yes. So that's the I part of the
I part.
Let's maybe look at the S, and the third one is really the social awareness quotient. And in the team perspective taking, I think there is a big need for us to recognize the need for empathy in teams. Whether there is appreciation for diversity in teams, is there respect for others, or are we simply just being compassionate with each other? All of this makes up for, collectively the social awareness quotient, and really determines the pulse or the health of the team. So it's important to be, compassionate. The last 1 year, I think, has not been the most easy for anyone. So simple words like, genuine care of someone, about asking about their day, or showing genuine interest. We've seen a lot of, we really want to avoid the superficial, hope you're doing fine. We really want to go deeper. And, when I say compassion, I would say it should be genuine. And when the genuineness is coming across. So that's really another deeper point where you connect with your teams and, you really, I think, find some common points. Maybe you had same experiences about, the pandemic, or you had same experiences at work. So I think that it's really important to bring out that compassion. And I also think it is quite nice because it keeps the whole atmosphere very healthy. But first, before you expect something from anyone, I think it's important to embody these attributes yourself. So before we go seeking it out in the world, I think, it's really time for some self-reflection where you ask yourself, are you embodying those attributes that you want to see in the teams? And then leading by example. So that's a little bit on the social awareness part. And the last of the risk with a C stands for communication. And before we choose how to communicate, I think, again, it's really important to be self-assured of the what and the why. Like you asked me, in the beginning, the why. I think it's about putting your vision into action. And when you're talking about communication, I think there is a need for building a sense of trustworthiness about you. It is really about how we choose to communicate, about the mode of communication. Also, are we, could you avoid an email and have a micro meeting instead, or could you avoid a meeting and have a short, quick email to manage your stuff? So I think, do you also maybe communicate with some sort of sensitivity, with affirmations, or are you completely being passive aggressive? So sometimes in this in this whole shift of the world, it's easy to lose sight of your own styles of operating in the world. So a little bit of a self-check or a self-evaluation, I think, really comes handy when you become conscious of your communication styles and how you want to achieve your goals. And then I think there is also then a need to organize communication. When we talk about organizing communication, I think we have so many fantastic tools online, like class cubes and so many more, where you can all have your communications with virtual teams all organized in one platform, which makes it easier for the managers to see what's happening, for other team members to look at their interdependencies, and it kind of gives you a real structure than having the communication in the air, as we say. But yes, that's all I wanted to share about the risk discoveries that I did over the last couple of years.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. So on the sustainable, you covered in the S element, or you have something to add in terms of
Yeah, definitely. I think the other question is really interesting when you mentioned that these are fragile times, and
Mhm.
there is so much happening around us. What is also quite nice that you observe is I saw student loans you mentioned, right? And I feel that with so much happening around us, there is a disproportionate amount of risk that we all hold collectively. And so in this time, building that tenacity and that resilience, both individually and collectively, becomes all the more relevant. And what I have seen is that whenever there is this sort of a disruption on a macro level, it's really the time to navigate ambiguity and redundancy.
Mhm.
And that's why I think mostly right now, all organizations are talking about reskilling, upskilling their workforces because we're all at the risk of redundancy.
Mhm.
And organizations around the world are also contemplating what are the younger workforce's needs.
Mhm.
So they are entering the professional world at a time when the markets are super fragile. Some first-time workers have lost their jobs. Some of them, have gone to part-time working. So I think everything is really fragile around us. So I think at this point, it is really important for the role of the leaders and how the leaders really step up in what they make out of a crisis. And from what I have seen work really well is when leaders take the role of opening opportunities
Mhm.
and and also because on one side there is a loss of opportunities, but there is also a creation of a whole lot of new opportunities. And I think the vision to kind of show the path for your team members, for your other colleagues. I think for leaders to set that vision and to be able to show that show new opportunities for their colleagues becomes really, really important because it sets a really nice climate and culture for nurturing people to bring out their best.
Absolutely. No, great insights. And as I said, fragile times, navigating requires a different approach. I always say that the virtual team is like the atom, where you have a nucleus and then you have a various particles flying around. In a virtual team, our goal is to retain the gravity despite the distance, the gravity between the individual team members, which are the particles, towards the nucleus. But nucleus is not the leader, the manager, or whatever. It is the team purpose and goal. And therefore, setting the goal and the purpose and the why as a team, bottom up, is crucially important. And this is what we usually do in a interactive online or live formats. And many of your intention, the social responsibility resonated with this. You need to communicate with a strong nucleus. And if you do it as a team, it will prevent many of the problems occurring later. Great. So we discussed a bit your rich past, now the fragile times. What do you think will be the success factor in leading virtual teams in the future? Apparently
Well, I
things
think,
change.
Peter, you are the expert, so I think you are the best person to answer this. But I can only speak from experience. And I think the biggest factor in leading remote teams in the future, I think, is being aware of the vast intellectual profits that sit with the teams.
Mhm.
Over the last year, I feel people in different parts of the world have experienced and learned something different out of the pandemic. We saw some startup founders become their own coders. We saw some consultants become full-time forex traders, and so on. So I feel that there is this lot of diversity in terms of intellectual gains that people have had over these years. And then I feel that we really should leverage. And the good news is that these profits are measurable. Your intellectual profits are also without boundaries and they don't need visas.
Mhm.
So I think it's really nice if, as organizations or as team leaders, we are able to recognize this intellectual profit that sits within the teams and are able to leverage it towards working, towards our collective goals.
Absolutely. The first title of my book, the working title was "Everyone is a Star." So just leading towards the rich intellectual capital and emotional capital and spiritual capital, if you wish, that everyone in the team brings to the table. And it's the role of the leader to facilitate in such a way so those strengths, talents, intentions, and spiritual capital, they become, everybody becomes aware of that, and they are harnessed for the team, for achieving the team goal. And there are many things to do that. There are many formats, but it has to be a conscious effort, and ideally well-facilitated formats for people to show up their talents, their strengths. We do it, we discover the natural strengths and talents. And then instead of delegation, people would voluntarily pick based on their strengths. So it is really now, as you said, no visas, no boundaries. The talents are everywhere. And by uniting global talents, we could achieve miracles, including tackle one of our toughest challenges, climate change, poverty and rich gap, and so on.
Definitely. I think the line, I read it somewhere, and I said, talent without visas. And I think it's such a powerful line, because earlier we've been, okay, we would wait for someone to fly in, take a 18-hour flight, and then come in and contribute to a project sprint. And now, it's just like, you don't have to wait for the visas, you don't have to wait for the travel time. All you need to do is get on a call and you have it. And then it's up to you what you make out of it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So you have a rich experience. What was so far your most exciting or your most exotic experience working in a global remote team?
Well, that's an interesting one. So I've had a lot of exciting experiences, because I think for as long as I can remember, since the time we started working virtual, my goal was to not let the virtual working fatigue come in. And I wanted to make sure we were always, even if it was just meeting for fun for like just 5 or 10 minutes, the micro breaks would be there. But, something interesting comes to my mind is that we were forming, pretty recently, we were forming global teams, new global teams for some projects that had come up. And it involved people who had never known each other before, had never had the chance to work with each other before. And so we're complete strangers, but from the same company. And given that the traveling has been so limited over the last year, we decided to have a virtual traveling session. And everyone, had to walk through their countries. So in 1 hour, Peter, you wouldn't believe, we walked through the streets of Singapore, we saw the beach in Spain, we ate a pizza in Italy, of course, without the calories, visited a Hindu temple in India, and we saw 15 countries all in just 1 hour. And this was, I think, one of the most exciting experiences, because I have never in my life, in 1 hour, experienced, seen 15 countries all at once in this truest, authentic state.
Wow, it's a great story, great idea. Was it based on pictures, or it was like video, real video? People were showing.
Yes, it was live video. So whoever's turn was next, they would open their cameras and just walk with their phones through the streets, or take us to their favorite cafe, or give us a nice taste of the food there. But yeah, it was, I think, one of the most truly memorable experiences.
How did you call it? What was the name of it?
Virtual traveling sessions.
Okay, perfect. No, that's great. Thank you. What is your favorite virtual collaboration tool? Apparently, we were forced to use many tools, but which one is your favorite?
I think I can really say that I've used quite a lot of virtual tools, because as a part of my job is to make sure that the content and what I'm doing for the young leaders is relevant, is engaging, and is also very is also fun, because you like to have fun while learning. Nobody likes to be in boring sessions. So I'm constantly on researching about new tools coming in, and I think I'd love to mention the tool Miro. It's really engaging, it's very intuitive, and I think it's almost a very in-person collaborative experience of a digital whiteboard. I think it's as close as it comes to being in one room together. So if our listeners are looking for some inspiration for whiteboard collaborations and brainstorming sessions, I would definitely recommend Miro. And if you talk about an app, I would say I love using Slido. We use it quite often in our sessions, and it facilitates quite a fun virtual interaction. Everything can be done and the results can be seen in real time. And so I would really like to recommend that if our listeners are looking for some inspiration on virtual collaborating apps.
Perfect, perfect. I've been using them both, and I could just echo your enthusiasm. And Miro, recently I've read on a whiteboarding, because for collaboration, co-creation, whiteboarding is essential. And in fact, some of the things you could do faster in a real whiteboard, because you don't have to queue, but in parallel, people can put it in every corner and every space. And mural were on the top right corner, which was user-friendly, but also rich functionality and futuristic. So apparently the researchers and the analysts also recognize those tools. Great. So let's give our listeners something tangible. What would be your number one tip or your number one advice for people which now start leading, remote or global teams?
So the number one advice for people leading remote teams, and that's a really interesting question, Peter, and I'll tell you why, because this question particularly deals with the human mind, and it deals with how do you deal with the human mind in an intelligent way. The way the human mind is built, there is research on the forgetting curve, and I'm sure you know about this very well. You yourself are really well researched, so you know that within 1 hour, people would have forgotten 50% of what they have just the information that they just learned. Within 24 hours, they would have forgotten an average of 70% of new information. And within a week, people tend to forget 90% of what was shared with you on the last Monday morning. So I think I would really like to emphasize on one fact or an advice that it's important to keep your teams connected to the purpose. And that's what we've been really talking about. How well is your purpose communicated? How well is it imbibed by the team, and how well is it integrated in the daily lives and the daily works of our teams? I think it's also very, very important to ask yourself that question before you send it out to your team. Are you really creating that climate of trust? Are you creating the climate of psychological safety? And are you refocusing on opening up opportunities for your team members? And are you providing that space and support for people to be relevant in real time?
No, that's great. And remembering the what, people remember how you make them feel much more. They remember the feeling than the facts. And as you said, the why, the well-formulated why, ideally as a team, and you cannot reiterate it enough. I mean, it's always worthwhile to reiterate it, because if it's done as a team, it triggers these emotions, which, give them fuel. And also whatever activities you have, to make sure you make a connection and a link, how it contributes to our purpose and our why. And those things, some managers, they go to the task, but reiterating and making the link triggers the emotions, improves the remember factor, but it also improves motivation and everything. So I fully agree with
Thanks, Peter, for bringing that out, because I think, the fact that you mentioned it is people always remember how you make them feel than, what you tell them. It is so important. And thanks for bringing that out, because we most often than not just overlook this fact. We don't even care about what is the feeling. A simple hello can really make someone feel really amazing or really doubtful. So that's a really powerful one. But before you take me through to the other questions, I want to pull you a little bit on a couple of questions I have for you, since you are the super expert and the guru on virtual teams. So would you be ready for some rapid fire questions?
First time our listeners will have me, turning the table, but yes, ready for you.
Awesome. So, and these are some questions I've observed over a couple of years, Peter, and I thought this would be the best opportunity to ask you these. So first, I'd like to challenge the question of distrust. We are really talking about a lot of trust building, and I also mentioned it's important to build a climate of psychological safety. But whilst we are not there, and whilst the climate of trust does not exist, how does a team, or how do people manage the challenges of distrust that could potentially exist in teams?
Mhm. I think trust, from my perspective, is a function of two things. One is personality, how deep, how well people know each other as human beings. And the other is professional competence. Do they have the skills needed in order to deliver what you are asking for? And or phrased otherwise, phrased in different words, is will he do it, he or she? That's a question of personality, if he or she would respond to the challenge that you have. And the other is, can he or she do it, if he has the skills? So same things with will and can. And in order to distrust is the default state, in a sense, particularly in a virtual environment where people haven't met and they don't have a glimpse of their personality, their holistic human being. So you have to provide time and space as a leader for people to get to know each other as human beings. And I do a couple of things, and they are very, very kind of compact, don't take much time, but work like magic. One is the life journey. So I ask people to present themselves with a life journey. And they do some preparation. They would, scale it. What are the highlights, the moment you are most proud of? What are the lowlights where we struggle, but nevertheless managed to overcome? And you will see which of the highlight is the highest. So take some preparation. It's like self-therapy. But when you share within seconds, it's like 5 to 10 minutes per person, people find out what makes the heart of this person singing. So it is really very powerful. And it works because people discover similarities. People discover that everyone had, low lights. People know it, but if you see what concretely it was, it creates sympathy, it creates connection. And everybody usually, with very few exceptions, finishes. The end of the life journey is always going up. Thing called hope, that the future will be brighter, and so on. So discovering those similarities and linking it is powerful. I have something called flash intro. These are 4 simple questions we could practice, but they work like miracles as well. First is siblings, brothers or sisters. Second is hobby as a child. Third one is what you are most proud of. And fourth one is what else others should know about you. So 4 simple questions. Every time we do it in a breakout rooms, people come with such a big smile in the end in the room, and we have a very, very vivid debrief. I can talk for hours, which is not the purpose now, but these 4 questions are not random. First 2 are easy, but still give you a lot of insights. Again, we'll not go into details. Second 2, you have to show vulnerability. You have to decide what you share. And this is exactly what Google discovered in their project Aristotle, which brings psychological safety, which is so essential. This is the #1 characteristics that, without any exception, all high-performing teams have in common. So, and then we work with pictures and so on. So you need to provide time and space for people to show their personality. That's why my first big rock out of 10 is personality in focus. So with the right format, make sure people show up. Second big rock is strength matrix. So we have another 5 questions, peer coaching. They discover their natural strengths and talents. And then you answer the questions, will he and can he? And then you kind of, the distrust, you shed light on the distrust, it goes into the corner, and then the trust starts appearing. Apparently, you need to try it out, you need to test it, but people will be more likely to test. And then comes the other things. But my answer is, by default, is distrust, but they are quick exercises that you could do online. Don't shy away that people now work from home and you have no travel budget, and you will start climbing up the curve of trust. And then with the structured communication, which is the second part of my virtual power teams method, you maintain this level. Does it answer?
I love the way you make everything sound so simple and so powerful, Peter. And I remember doing the life intensity graph myself. And I have to say and share this with our listeners that it is such a powerful way to start off any interaction or start off any relationship, because it gives such a wonderful insight without sharing too much detail.
Hello. Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can. I was just saying that without sharing too much information, the life intensity graph somehow is just so powerful to kick off any relationship or any interactions.
Absolutely.
Thanks for
Absolutely.
sharing that, Peter. My next question, and this is going to be a rapid fire, Peter. So I know you have so much stuff to say, but this one has to be a rapid fire. Tell me, when teams are struggling with a lack of office culture,
Mhm.
what is your recommendation for teams? You know, we are in a time where we are redefining cultures back at our offices. You know, our world has changed, so there is a gap between the culture that exists and the culture that we're trying to bring in the organization.
Mhm.
And the middle space is when there is this absolute freedom for interpretation of culture.
Mhm.
So when there is no culture, what is your recommendation for teams to be managing themselves efficiently?
Yes. I mean, twofold. It will be two rapid responses. One is let the team define the culture. That's important. And I do it on a free scale, leadership scale, so egalitarian versus hierarchical. Second is decision making top down versus consensus. And the third one is confrontational versus non confrontational. And these are like fundamental aspects and dimensions. And let the team decide and debate what is our optimal position on the scale. And just this debate creates transparency. In the end, they will list pros and cons and decide as a team what is the optimal position. And then they will reflect in smaller groups, what can I do in order to enable the chosen position and what our leader can do. Maybe you need something in terms of infrastructure, process, and so on. So by letting the team decide, you kind of open a little bit the Pandora box of culture, but then we put it in order because people chose it. And then they make a commitment, what can I do in order to live the culture that we've selected? And then they hold each other peer accountable. That's the big trick. You cannot do it in a local team to kind of impose culture and to control, even less in virtual. The only way, let them choose and they will hold each other peer accountable. For sure, you need to recognize progress, you need to praise in order to navigate. I usually say if there is one tip I can give, having 5 daughters and a wife, 6 women, this is praise, praise, praise.
Oh, I
And
love that.
it goes for virtual teams big time. What to praise? If there is a result, praise the result immediately. If there is no result yet, but you see the behavior supporting each other, so praise the behavior. If there is no result, no behavior, look harder. There is always something to praise. So again, when they pick the culture, they would hold each other peer accountable, but you as a leader praise a lot the one that comply, that hold each other peer accountable, and you will go on the positive spiral. That was one aspect. The other is be open, be very open, because as you say, fragile times, everything is new. So as a leader, you need to have a regular format where people share, their challenges related to remote work and to COVID. You have different level of sensitivities. Some people, are less sensitive towards, infection and so on, and they don't mind being in the office. Some are more sensitive. At home, you may have an aging parent, a sick child and so on, which working from home. So there are many now new dynamics that you have to address. You have to promote and stimulate people to share, and then see what can we do in order to adapt, in order to resolve your problem on a micro level, not compromising the team goals. So it has to be open. Again, lead by example, as you said, share your problems at home, your considerations, maybe your ideas, how can we resolve it? Because in those teams, that's essential. If you don't do it, people will continue struggling, you will have unclear expectations and so on. Just provide the safe space where people could share their current challenges, their concerns, and maybe as a team, somebody can help out here and there. Somebody could probably, adjust tolerance levels, deadline, and so on, and you will arrive at the solution and you will strengthen the team from this.
That's so lovely, because this also answers my fourth question, which was about the work ethic differences. And
Yes.
Peter, we were talking about this some time ago, and we were thinking that everybody has different work ethics, and the definition of work ethics is really subjective. Maybe, you have people in the team who are pretty comfortable in home office and are not interested in, coming back to work and traveling. But you also, on the other hand, have people who are so desperate to meet their colleagues and just hang out and have just a cup of coffee. So, then you have some people who are really drawing some boundaries between their work and personal life.
Mhm.
And then there are some who are just so flexible that, their boundaries might be blurred, but their productivity still remains. So how would you also then, give us a little insight about managing so many differences in just one team?
Yeah. Just to put the context, as you said, there is personality profilers, and it's also related to the work of Carl Jung. People now in COVID, which are thinking and introverted thinking type. So you have, for all of this, you have two options: introverted, which get energy from themselves, from within, and extroverted, they need external factors, colleagues, nature, and so on. So the introverted thinking types, who are, take energy from within, and they like to have a plan and a structure and think, they thrive in COVID times. They thrive in home office, unless they have too many distractions at home, which will and they don't want to come to the office. In fact, some surveys show that I think three quarters are not so willing to go back to the office, even if there is beautiful conditions there and so on. And the other, and that does not cover all people in totality, but these are the two strong preferences: introverted thinking type on one side and extroverted feeling type, which need extra interaction in order to get energy and energize, which are more feeling type. They make decisions based on feelings and so on. They cannot wait to go back to the office. So now, because the new reality of hybrid work will be different, and many of my clients now deciding what's the policy and so on, you need to make sure for these two preferences and for the dimensions that you mentioned in terms of solid borders, work and life, and so on. Again, you have to be open. There are many ways you could do with low-hanging fruits in order to satisfy the needs of one and the other type. For example, I was working with Dropbox recently, and they have this standing online room where people can just join and have a coffee. So whenever you go, it will mix you randomly with somebody who is in the room, and you will have your coffee not alone, but with a colleague, and you could have a chat. Or you could have a bigger format where you will be mixed with colleagues and have lunch and so on. So those social interactions on the coffee machine could be, to some extent, simulated in a virtual environment and satisfy the need for a connection with a human being. And there are many other tips where you could find a solution. I wouldn't go now to list them, but the key element, as I mentioned, is be open, flag the challenges as a team, see what can we do in order to resolve it, because there are so many ideas you could quickly implement, does not require investment. And don't put pressure. I mean, we had so much pressure anyway. As a leader, try to understand, and sometimes this is part of the therapy, just providing a time and space for people to connect, to share their concerns and challenges, resolve a couple of them. This will help. This will help to set the climate. So yeah, be open, listen more as a leader, look for advice, or research a little bit. There are so many good practices currently being implemented, which will take care of it. But first of all, you need to recognize it, you need to capture it, and make sure whatever progress you make, people hear back. It's not that, it just get lost.
Definitely. I think what was really important that you brought out, that whatever success you make or whatever achievement you did make, it's important to talk about it and to share it and just communicate about it, because I think that is also more than an inspiration. It also helps everyone get a sight of what's happening, and we're not no longer in a vacuum. And so, Peter, my last rapid fire question, and this is something that you've probably come across, and I think is a challenge most virtual teams face, is that How do you deal with delegation issues?
Yeah. Delegation. I was in Bali in 2019 speaking on a conference called Running Remote. So they invited companies, some of them quite big, with over 1,000 people without an office. So from day one, they decided not to have an office and be fully remote, and utilizing the talent without visa, finding the best people wherever they happen to be. And at some point in time, they asked the question, what is the number one skill to lead remote workers? And it is related to delegation. So we use Slido, in fact, and people were giving responses, and some got bigger. And at one point in time, the number one skill which emerged on the screen was over communicate, which initially sounded negative to me. But what is that? There are two aspects of over communicate, which has to do with delegation. First of all, tell them, not just give them the particular task in isolation, but give them why we do what we do. So just giving, again, as we said, the importance of reiterating the why, the purpose, and so on. Tell them why we do what we do. What is the goal that we want to achieve with this particular activity or task? Because otherwise you don't see them. Usually these things happen in asynchronous modus. You put it on Slack and people will read it while you're sleeping and so on. You don't see their reaction if they're not in agreement or if they're puzzled. So tell them why and what we want to achieve with this task. Otherwise, they will start bugging you back or their peers, and it will be unproductive times. And second aspect is ask them to rephrase, what they understood. If it's in a synchronous format, you could do it also in asynchronous. Because many of the communication get lost in translation in the online. This is the only way to make sure. So delegation, in this case, two aspects. You need to set the goal and purpose as a team. And the more remote team, the more this is crucial. Otherwise, it becomes, make or break factor. And if you have set the goal as a team and people pick their sub-goals, longer term goals based on their strengths, as we do in the virtual power teams, a lot of clarity and transparency is created up front. So in terms of delegation, you don't have to delegate so much on a micro level. They already have a bigger goal and they drive into this direction. So it is essential really to set the goal, discover the strengths, and let people choose. And then if you still have to do it, over communicate. The more remote, the more you need to over communicate, it pays back. Because otherwise, back and from, it will be much bigger and the quality will suffer. Does it answer?
Oh, definitely. I think I agree with the over communication bit, because even if things are obvious, it's easy to miss the obvious, and over communication is just another protection layer that you can put on and make sure everyone's on the same page, because I think in the end it's really about being aligned. But yeah, thank you so much for answering my questions, Peter. Back to you.
Thank you. That was a nice change. So let's conclude. We have two more questions I have for you. So one is very quick, rapid fire. What do you read or listen at the moment?
Well, that's an interesting one. Well, I'm reading two books at the moment, and one is evoking a lot of spiritual thoughts in me, and the other one is me experimenting with my life. The spiritual one I'm reading is the Bhagavad Gita. I'm sure you would have heard of it. It's one of the greatest philosophical literatures known to man. And it took place just before an onset of a war, the Mahabharata, a great war between the cousins of, the cousins trying to acquire, their kingdom. And so it's quite evoking, because it talks about the way we deal in our lives. And as far as I've reached, I think what stays with me and has become more and more relevant, given the background of the pandemic, is that if we were all to renounce our ego individually, we could rejoice in the bliss of infinity. And that's definitely some food for thought, given the background of the pandemic. And the other book that I'm reading is The 5 a.m. Revolution. Me and my partner, we have been waking up at 5 a.m. for the last 3 weeks, following the book by its word, taking in the exact amount of sunshine, the right amount of water, doing the Hawaii meditation, exercising, and starting. And by the time we start the day, we have already accomplished so much for our overall well-being that it's heightened our productivity, and it just kind of feels awesome to be able to take out so much more out of the 24 hours that we all have.
Absolutely amazing stuff.
And I'm quite interested to know what you are reading these days.
I read many books, usually more than 2 or 3. I'm still finishing No Rules Rule. That's by the founder of Netflix.
Yeah.
A great book, many insights, you know, how to drive top level innovation without much rules and micromanagement and even less management. I read How Innovation Works, great case studies and stories. I'm still finishing The Sapiens.
Okay.
So yeah, those would be the top 3, but there are some others. I'm even still finishing the probably read 90%. Mike Tyson, the boxer, published a book, Undisputed Truth. So he did a great transformation from the baddest person on the planet, a bit of a marketing, to now like a spiritual guru, if you wish. So yeah, many inspirational stuff.
Yeah, interesting, because I am also yet to finish The Sapiens and it just doesn't happen for some reason.
Good night reading, so you can always open somewhere.
Indeed.
So last question to you. What is the future of virtual teams?
Awesome question, Peter. I think, first of all, virtual teams are here to stay, and that is the truth. So I think you're in the right business. I think, with the new emerging technologies, with being able to, have flexi working and the potential cost saving, there is no doubt that virtual teams are, they are the new reality. And if we were to talk about the future of virtual teams, I'd love to dream of a time where we have 3D interactions in virtual teams. But until that is possible, I think the future of virtual teams is really in, keeping the climate warm and intellectually energizing.
Excellent, Bani. It was such a pleasure. For the first time, we had this like cross-interviewing each other. Thank you so much for your great insights, and I look forward to seeing you finally.
Thank you so much, Peter. It was a pleasure to be here.